What's up, TTM fam? Eric here. Sunday, August 17th, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Today's episode, Breaking the Cycle. Choosing different. Now, at some point, we all realize we've been carrying patterns that don't belong to us. The question is, do we repeat them or do we choose different? And that's one thing that honestly, I ponder. I've pondered all the time is, you know, do we stay with what we know or do we branch out and try to change, the situation if you recognize it? Well, it took me significantly longer to recognize, certain patterns that I was, doing because they were a part of my day to day, and I wasn't, I didn't have the awareness that I do now, but in the same token, it molded me to where I am today. You know, when you look back at the childhood, my, you know, childhood, teen years, early adulthood, seeing what I used to do, just kind of going along to get along, or get along to go along. Always kept quiet, but was always observing my situations, non-confrontational in certain aspects. I didn't have a voice, you know, until later on in life, and that's what, I didn't know how to communicate, um, deal with conflict, um, always suppressing my feelings and my emotions. So, when you have that sort of disconnect and that kind of way is you learn to adapt. And that's what I've done, from childhood all the way up until um, now. It's one thing. It's an ongoing struggle, right? So the biggest thing that I can kind of take away from it is that it made my awareness, um, show up. And in my professional life, I could see, and relationships as well, I could see certain patterns that I was doing. I was attracted to um, similar people. However, with my personal life, I was kind of able to um, you know change who I was because it was a fresh start. It was something that I could honestly, um, nobody knew the background, so it was just coming in and, being the best that I could be at whatever I was doing. Now, I've had a variety of jobs, you know, over my career, but, and I've been finally settling into one in my late 20s. Um, it has got me, well, with the company, I should say, has got me where I want because I was able to, persevere because I did not, I don't want to be, you know, how I was, how my parents were growing up, constantly working, no time for us, so on and so forth. So I've really, prioritized, by today's standards, me. I put me first. And that's one thing that has, um, by doing that has changed drastically for me. However, awareness, um, was trying to realize, what I was repeating constantly. When it came to relationships, it was very surface level. It was about physical attraction. Um, yeah, you had, it wasn't like, oh my God, what's your sign? How are you with this and that? I didn't care about that. Um, I was just about, when I was in relationships, I was 100% loyal, 100% faithful. But when I wasn't in a relationship, I didn't give a damn, and that's really, I didn't care about feelings, I didn't care about depth. Um, and that was really, coming from somebody who lost his virginity at 19, late bloomer, um, kind of, as that progressed, um, getting into a relationship, getting out of a relationship, didn't know how to handle relationships. So it wasn't like, we'd sit down and talk. You know what I mean? It was, we were getting down to the nitty gritty. You know what I mean? And it didn't matter. I didn't, if a problem arose, I know in some capacity I wasn't there. mentally, anyways. Physically, I may have been there, but not mentally, and that comes with the surface level of the relationship, where it's just based on the physical aspect. Sure, we get into arguments here and there, and unfortunately, I would get loud, and then they would get loud, and it was just like, okay, fine, and then you're leaving, and then you're coming back, and it's just like, what are you doing? But I did, learn a lot, because at the end of the day, those are choices that I made, and some of them good, some of them not so good. Um, and that's one thing that helped mold me um, in my mid 20s, because of the choices that I had made. Um, you know, the biggest thing that I struggled with was change. You know, how to be honest about how hard it is to break a cycle of old habits. What's familiar, what's comfortable, and um, looking back at that now, is I was complacent. I did not go beyond my comfort zone. I wasn't adventurous. I'm an introvert by nature. Excuse me. I'm an introvert by nature, and generally a pretty quiet person, overall, unless somebody's engaging me in a topic of sorts. When you look at old patterns of, you know, when things were tough in either my regular life or personal life, it was deflect or shut down. So it was a lot easier to deflect, or shut down, because I didn't have to answer to anybody, because nobody asked. Nobody at that point in time, was like, oh, well, this is really important to me, and I was just like, eh, blew it off. Was the best thing? No, not at all. But that's all that I knew, because growing up is, when things got hard, everybody got quiet, and when things get quiet, you hope that it gets swept under that proverbial rug, um, and it never gets put out in the open. I didn't have hard talks, um, because they just weren't a, it wasn't something that was brought up, you know. Um, Again, coming from a, like, fuck your feelings background, I've mentioned it before, but, that's why I did not, like, it did not register with me. So, um, and it kind of explains a lot, because I think back in certain relationships on, how I was treated, how I treated them. Um, you know, was I the best? No, not at all. Was I the worst? No, not at all. I'm sure at times I probably was in their eyes, but it was something to me that, um, just continuing to fall back. So go from relationship to a relationship to no relationship to nothing, no, back into a relationship. And I tend to go for, at that time it was, fixers, somebody who I felt that I could fix. And was that a good thing? No. I mean, it worked for a little bit, but then again, I've realized later on that I expected way too much in return. And if it wasn't being reciprocated in the way that I thought at that point in time, then I became upset. I became resentful. And that took me a while, a really, really, really long time to kind of, break and kind of understand. Um, and it wasn't until later in life that I learned how to cope and deal with, certain situations. And, but again, it has to be a conscious choice. And if you don't put that in the forefront, it can be easily forgotten. And I continue to do that. I'll be like, I can't do this. But then I would find out that I'm doing it. And guess what? Here we go. Round and round we go. Where we'll stop, nobody knows. But again, the tools that I learned were through mistakes, through choices. Um, and at first, what I tried to do was avoid all of it, avoid doing, the same thing, similar things in relationships, because again, I was a creature of habit, comfortable. Like this is how I did, and it took me, and you're gonna hear me say this a lot. Like it took me a while. One, because I'm a guy, and two, I don't go soul searching. I don't, review. At least I didn't review. Let me rephrase that. During these times of my, early mid 20s and 30s, like, I didn't review certain things, and I was just like, oh, okay. I took it as a very, I took everything as surface level. So the tools of, you know, pausing and actually understanding before you react, or something like journaling, writing stuff down, whether it's your day to day, whether it's your moment, whether it's your, whatever you want to journal about, work, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, journal about it. Talking, surrounding yourself with people that have healthy behaviors, that is really kind of a lot of it too, is who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with people that have negative energy and are drama queens, that love the tea, if you will, that's what you're going to get in return. And unfortunately, when you have that mindset, you don't get, nothing positive gets done, because you are seeing it through your blinders. You have that tunnel vision. And with that tunnel vision, it's a dangerous thing, because you aren't thinking clearly, and you're only focused on one thing. And if you don't get to that one thing, then all is lost, so to speak. Um, but yeah, so I mean, with myself, like, I have a very small circle now. I have um, two to three really, good friends that know about me, know about my past, that I've included, in that, because, back in my early 20s, when I would go out to the bars and I would go out, I had bar friends. They're like, oh yeah, there he is. And the funny thing is, anyway, excuse me, they would have, they would be wearing same clothes, same drinks, same stories, like every single time. And, I used to test that, because I rarely go out, anymore. In my late 20s, I kind of, continued to go out, but it wasn't on the level, um, in my early 20s. Why? Because I had gotten sober, but I enjoyed the interaction, you know, um, with that. So, you know, again, getting back to the tools, and what you learn is, you can either, hopefully you have, a solid base where you talk about these things, you talk about them regularly, not when, something comes up. Because if you choose to not acknowledge what is going on right then and there, it will get suppressed and it will get forgotten about. And it might be important in that moment, and that's why you have to have people around you, so you can, talk to that person in your moment of need. And you have to have, that one person, whether it's a parent, whether it's a relative, sibling, boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend. Like, it doesn't matter, coworker. Like, be careful with coworkers though, because it is your place of business, and you don't really want to mix that, because world's an evil place. But like, you just want to have that one confidant that you can go to and say, hey, this is what's going on, and it's okay to have one. You don't have to have 30. You don't have to have seven, one for every single day of the week. Just choose one to two. Um, but all you need is one, simply because if they're going to be able to listen and be able to take in, what you're saying, um, that allows you to get it out in the open. And sometimes, as we progress through this series, basically it's, you know, what I've learned in the past, coming on 3 months now, is, just life changing in, my approach to my day to day. Because I was talking about it, I was writing stuff down. I was like, oh, whoa, this is how I felt. This is what I saw, and to be able to see that and then have it click, like, oh, there it is, light bulb, boom, you know, that is growth. Um, but getting back to cycles, it's not really about breaking. Is that, I mean, it's not about perfection. That's one thing I want you to understand through this is nobody's going to be perfect. I don't want you to be perfect. You are perfectly imperfect. Remember that and tell yourself that, because everybody is different. Everybody is perfectly imperfect, no matter who they are. Everybody's got flaws. Everybody's got something that they're not proud of, or you know, somebody has that. So it's just understand that you're not alone in that. What you really want to focus on is breaking your automatic cycles of patterns. Kind of changing your attitude, changing your mindset, changing your focus, choosing compassion over anger, presence over avoidance, and honesty over suppression. Um, because if when you're single, you don't have you don't really have any worries, right? Like, in the sense, oh, what am I gonna wear? What am I gonna wear to the bar tonight? Oh, okay. Like, or what am I gonna wear out? Who am I gonna do, this with? But in the same thing, if you have close family ties, the one thing is if you choose to suppress everything, that shows. If you choose to avoid everything, that shows. If you choose to be angry over everything, that shows. And that shows to your nieces, nephews, parents, friends, coworkers, kids, you name it. Everybody feels it. And they will say something if they care about it. Like, hey, something's not right here. Um, so you kind of have to be aware. But truthfully, honesty is the best policy. Why? Because if you're honest with yourself and you're not telling yourself any lies, at least with me, that says I'm being accountable. I'm holding myself accountable, for what I'm saying. Like, if you screwed up, then understand you screwed up. But we're all going to screw up. So you just have to make sure that you learn from that. Why did you choose to do the things that you did? And really put yourself through the test of yours. And you can ask for outside help, again, just because, you know, if you continue to do the same cycle over and over and over again, it's like it's like on borderline insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's how patterns are. Patterns, if you do the same thing over and over again, yeah, it'll be great, great, fine, 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 and boom, all of a sudden it goes sideways. And you're like, wait a minute, why? Because you haven't changed, you haven't done the inner work to fix yourself and understand that, it's time for you to change. And that takes a lot. I'm not gonna lie. It is a brutal, brutal way to go through. But if you hear it from a friend or a loved one, just understand that they're saying it from a place in their heart. They're not saying it to hurt you. They're saying it because they do care about you, and they may, when it comes to partners, they're saying it because they love you, because they're like, hey, listen, if you could just adjust this one thing, we would be great. Or these are the things that really kind of concern me. When it comes to relationships, with work, the same thing. Like, the same thing. If your boss comes up to you and says, hey, listen, I've noticed X. Like, We have to change that up. We have to do better. And that really is kind of, something to take, is to take that constructive criticism and take that and really ask yourself, is why was I doing that? What caused me to do that? When you find the root of the cause, you're then able to resolve it. And with that being said, it's overall you just feel better. So um, the breaking of the cycles takes a lot, but you have to have that self awareness. Um, and being a father, and you know seeing how I've acted, you know in my younger years, and even through my marriage, and and through the divorce, and all of that, it's still, there's certain things that I'm still learning. And when it comes to certain cycles, it's a part of your truth. um, but the one thing is, I don't want to pass that down. When it comes to my daughter, like, I want her to understand certain things, and I've always told her, you know don't do as I do. Don't, because you're better than that. And I've always said that to her. And now as she's getting older, yes, she is going to, continue to, push my buttons, but she's always going to push my buttons. But overall, you have to kind of ask yourself, this is a part of my truth, breaking the cycle so I don't pass it down. What's a cycle you've recognized in your own life? That's the question that I want you to ask and ponder after this episode. And if you come up with something, leave a comment. Honestly, like, I want to be able to read your comments, and see if there's anything that I can add, possibly. Um, feel free to share your stories or an experience that you had. Coming up, on next week's episode, is we're gonna see how the impact of my new choices, how they reshaped relationships. And honestly, it's something that you really, it's amazing when you make a change on doing things, and how your mindset, kind of flips the script on you, and it's a good thing. The bigger, one thing is you have to be, kind of the three A's, right? Awareness, action, and accountability. And those are prevalent, to sustain any sort of relationship, healthy relationship, whether it be professional or personal. You have to kind of, keep that in mind. And, you know, when you're healing, um, healing is a good thing. Like, when you admit to yourself that, hey, like, this is what I did, like, I can't believe I did this, don't beat yourself up over it. You did it, it's done. Forgive yourself. Understand that. It's okay to forgive yourself, right? Why? Because if you don't, you're going to be carrying that weight with you, and I don't want you to carry that weight. I want you to be able to forgive yourself so you can move forward. Because what you've done, you're gonna always remember, no matter what. There's gonna be a sign, a song, a smell, a color, whatever. That's gonna remind you, bring you back to that particular moment. But you have to be able to forgive yourself. Um, because honestly, the pain that I put the pain that I put myself through because of my repeating patterns, I was just a glutton for punishment. I was the crash test dummy, if you will. Constantly been like, oh, I know exactly what's going on here. I'm in the driver's seat. I'm driving into a wall, and I did. Just drove right into a wall every single time, and I did that over and over and over and over again. The one thing people will notice about you is that when you don't change The one thing, like when you go through changes, is people will notice it, and you have to kind of, say to yourself, you're not just changing for yourself, you're changing for everyone around you. And that's really what it is. If you're in a negative situation, you want to get out of that negative situation. Force yourself, hey, I got to make some tough choices. Have those hard talks with yourself and those little heart to hearts. Like that's important because you have to take care of yourself. You cannot put yourself on the back burner. Not at all. You're too valuable of a person, and you have to know your worth. So definitely keep that in mind as you're going through your progression, And it's not going to be an overnight thing. It does take time because, breaking habits, breaking cycles takes a lot because we've been conditioned for so long by doing the same things over and over and over again, you know. One thing that I preach is consistency, is be consistent, you know, um, and be disciplined. I mean, motivation's good. Don't get me wrong, but consistency and discipline that will change everything. It's no different from gym schedule. Once you get on a good gym schedule, all right, well, this is what my gym schedule is going to be, and as long as I do that all the time, we'll be good. It's when things get kind of knocked out. Been like, oh, I was supposed to go to the gym today, but I had something come up. Well, you still owe yourself that extra gym session, so give it to yourself. Just find a way to make it work, and if it doesn't happen, don't beat yourself up, honestly. Like, life, one thing is life doesn't stop. Never has, never will. The only time life stops is when we're dead. And no matter what's going on, whether it's the best news in the world or the worst news in the world, we have to keep moving forward. And that's one thing that I want you to really put on the forefront of your brain, is that no matter what, whether I'm having the best day ever, I keep moving forward. If I'm having the worst day ever, I keep moving forward. Why? Because life does not stop. With that said, thank you for joining me on this Sunday morning. I hope you guys have a great day. And get ready for episode 7, dropping next Sunday. Again, if you like what you see, subscribe, leave a comment down below. I'll catch you guys later.